I did a talk recently about the winter solstice in Karahan Tepe in Turkey, and I showed the geometry that was involved in the solstice alignment at that time. But of course, this talk raises the question of the origin of Christmas. If in 9000 BC the winter solstice was already being marked in Karahan Tepe, then this feast time is much older than the origins of Christmas. So I thought today I'd like to go into that question a little deeper about the origins of Christmas and why Christmas is on the 25th of December. And to do that, I wanted to ask some questions to ChatGPT and find out exactly what the kind of official idea about this question actually is. So the first question I'd like to ask ChatGPT is, who decided that Christmas would be on the 25th of December?
The date of Christmas, December 25th, was established in the 4th century by the Christian Church. It has been associated with the celebration of the birth of Jesus Christ. Although the Bible does not specify the exact date of Jesus' birth, the choice of December 25th was established to coincide with pre-existing pagan festivals celebrating the winter solstice.
Yes, but the winter solstice isn't on the 25th of December.
You're right, and I apologize for the confusion. The choice of December 25th to celebrate Christmas doesn't exactly align with the winter solstice, which usually falls around December 21st in the Northern Hemisphere. The date is more linked to historical ties, with earlier pagan festivities, and the choice of December 25th was influenced by various cultural and religious factors over time.
Okay, so what was the date of the winter solstice in the 4th century?
In the 4th century, according to the Julian calendar, the winter solstice usually fell around December 25th. However, variations in calendars and the accuracy of calculations can lead to minor differences.
So in fact, when the first Christians determined that the date of Christmas was the 25th of December, at that time, that was actually the date of the winter solstice.
Yes, the time when the Christian Church set the date for Christmas in the 4th century. The winter solstice was usually around December 25th, according to the Julian calendar. This probably played a role in the choice of this date for the celebration of the birth of Jesus.
Well, yes, that seems rather obvious, doesn't it? If in the 4th century the winter solstice was on the 25th of December and the founding church fathers determined Christmas on the 25th of December at winter solstice, then it's quite obvious that they were placing the birth of Jesus at the winter solstice. Okay? So why is there so much confusion about this today? What's happened? Why do people not realize that they are feasting the winter solstice when they celebrate Christmas? And this is all linked to do with the calendar. And I'll explain this to you now. So the solar year lasts 365.2422 days. It's not a whole number of days, and this is why there's some sort of complexity linked to the calendar. Now, we'll look at the dates of the calendar in a minute, but when Julius Caesar introduced the calendar, which is called the Julian calendar because it was introduced by Julius Caesar, the year was 365.25 days. Okay? To do that, Julius Caesar introduced what's called the leap year. So every 4 years, that's an extra day in the calendar, the 29th of February. Everybody knows this now. And so in his calendar, by adding one extra day every 4 years, that's the equivalent of adding a quarter of a day every year, And so that's 365.25 days. But this is longer than the actual length of the year, which is 365.2422. There is a difference of 0.0078 days every year. Now, you may say that's not very much. That becomes 0.78 days in a century. And over 400 years, the calendar advances by 3.12 days. So that starts becoming rather significant when the different centuries start adding up. Okay? So what this means is, in the year 700, the Roman 700 BC, the Roman Republican calendar began the year at the spring equinox. Okay, so the first month of the year was March, and then September was the seventh month, as its name explains. Sept is seven, septuple. October was the eighth month. Oct is the octagon, 8. November, 9, the ninth month, and December, the 10th month. Okay, so the names of the months were linked to the order that they had with the year starting in March. This is the equivalent of the zodiac, where the zodiac starts on the 21st of March. Today, now in our calendar, 21st of March, it starts in March at the spring equinox. And so there are 12 zodiac signs, or 12 months of the year, starting at the spring equinox. Okay, so the ancient calendar was linked to the zodiac signs now. And then in 46 BC, once that Julius Caesar had conquered the Gauls, he introduced a new solar calendar that began on the 1st of January. So he introduced this date of the 1st of January as the beginning of the year. Now, why did he do that? Why introduce this date of the 1st of January? This is very interesting. He'd been in contact with the Celts and the Gauls for a few years, and he was in admiration of the Druids. He actually writes that in his book on the war with the Celts, the Gauls. And they had a calendar based on 40 days. Okay, so for example, the beginning of the year was Samhain, which was on the 1st of November, which was 40 days after the autumn equinox. And that gave them 9 months of 40 days. Now, the details, the calendar was not written down, so we don't have incredible details about how this calendar worked. But what's quite clear is that this 40-day period was used. The fact that the 1st of January was placed 80 days, 2 40-day periods before the equinox, the 21st of March, is very interesting. And it could show some kind of relationship, some kind of agreement between Caesar and the Gauls to introduce a new calendar, which would in some way include the ancient Celtic calendar. Okay, so anyway, that became the 1st of January, became the beginning of the year, and it was linked to Janus, the Roman god, who had 2 faces. One face was looking to the past, and one face was looking to the future, and that was the mark of the 1st of January. And in his new year, he introduced the leap year, 1 leap year every 4 years, as we explained, which would compensate the fact that there was a kind of quarter-day gap on the length of the year. Okay? The names of the months remained unchanged. which is why today, although September is the 9th month, it's still called September. It's quite astounding that many, many people use this calendar without realizing that the names of the months don't correspond to their numbers. Okay, so the winter solstice was fixed on the 21st of December in Julius Caesar's calendar. Now, this calendar, as we see, moves out of step with the seasons by 3.12 days every 400 years. In 313, the Emperor Constantine made Christianity the state religion of the Roman Empire with the Edict of Milan. Now, it didn't make it an obligatory religion. It kind of accepted Christianity as a major religion. And so the Christians who had been persecuted up until then were more free to act. Christianity was very much installed in Egypt. It's a very little known fact that the first place where Christianity really took off was in Egypt. And all this was the fact that the Christianity became a kind of state religion of the Romans was a way of unifying the different parts of the empire. Okay, so that was a very important fact, and it meant that the Christians then started having meetings, councils, where they were going to decide different things and officialize different things in their newfound Christian religion. So a very well-known council took place in 325, the Council of Nicaea, which did not specifically set Christmas on the 25th of December. They didn't actually talk about Christmas. There was talk about Easter and how the date of Easter should be fixed. And I've talked about that a lot in different talks I've done. This date was associated with the celebration of the birth of Jesus a bit later in the 4th century. We'll come to that in a second. And although the council dealt with the crucial theological issues such as the nature of Christ, it didn't fix the date of Christmas. Now, in 354, there was a calendar which was written. So this calendar was found at the beginning of the 20th century. It's called the Chronography of 354, or the Calendar of 354. It's an ancient Roman manuscript that lists the significant dates in the Christian calendar, including the celebration of Christmas on December the 25th. And other key events in the Christian liturgical calendar. So in 354, we know that Christmas was feasted on the 25th of December. Now, this is 400 years, exactly 400 years. 354 plus 46 makes 400 years. So this is exactly 400 years after the introduction of the Julian calendar. So the winter solstice took place on the 25th of December because of the shift in the calendar. Okay, now it had been in 46 BC, it was on the 21st of December. Now we've added more than 3 days to the calendar. So 22nd, 23rd, 24th, 25th. So now the winter solstice took place on the 25th of December because of the difference in the Julian calendar. This is something which is very important to understand. And this is what ChatGPT finally accepted, finally admitted, after being questioned in different ways, is that in fact, yes, in the 4th century, when the church decided that Christmas was on the 25th of December, the 25th of December was the winter solstice. Okay, That's very important to understand. It's just a question of calendar. There was a slip in the calendar. But of course, they fixed it on the 25th of December at that date. But the calendar kept slipping. Okay? Now, this went on for quite some time, for several centuries, and the Julian calendar was slipping further and further away from the actual solar calendar, which meant that the solstice, the equinox, for example, the spring equinox, instead of taking place on the 21st of March, it was slowly sliding forward, and it had got, by the 16th century, the spring equinox was in April. Okay, so this was not correct. The spring equinox had always been in March, so the fact that it was in April, it was a problem. And so the Pope Gregory decided to change the calendar, modify the calendar, and to bring it back in line with the initial fact of solstice on the 21st of December, winter solstice, and spring equinox on the 21st of March. This was very important for determining the date of Easter, which is linked to the spring equinox. So he introduced a year which, instead of being 365.25, was 365.2425. Okay, so this is much, much closer to the actual perfect length of the year. So how did he do that? He did that by removing 3 leap years every 400 years. Okay, so when the century is not divisible, by 4. Okay, so for example, 1700, 1800, 1900, that's not divisible by 4. And so there were no leap years. But 1600, that's divisible by 4. 2000 is divisible by 4. So there were leap years in 1600 and in 2000. There won't be a leap year in 2100, 2200 and 2300, but in 2400, if we're still here, then there'll be a leap year again. That was an important fact. And so not only did he change the calendar system by taking away these leap years, but he also recalibrated the calendar back to its initial calibration by taking 11 days out of the calendar. Okay? So in 1582, the Pope Gregory reformed the calendar to bring it back in line with the solstice and equinoxes, and he removed 11 days from the calendar between the 9th and 21st of December in 1582. So the day after the 9th of December was the 21st of December. Why did he take 11 days off? Well, because since minus 46 or 46 BC, this difference had been slowly building up. In the 4th century, there were 3.12 days difference, but by the 16th century, there were 11 days difference, right? And that's why it became very important. The 21st of March, okay, plus 11 days, well, that became the 1st of April, okay? And so that's why it became very important to recalibrate the whole system. That was very difficult. People had a lot of trouble just taking days out of their calendar. There was a lot of complaints about it. Italy went first, and then the French followed suit a bit later. But of course, the Orthodox Church never changed. The Orthodox Church and the Coptic Church in Egypt has remained on the Julian calendar. And that's why they don't celebrate New Year on the same day as in the other calendar. Okay, so that was a very important fact. But, however, the date of Christmas was not modified. So Gregory did not say, well, we're going to put Christmas back to the 21st of December, because people have been celebrating Christmas on the 25th of December since the 4th century. And it was the church fathers who had put this date of the 25th of December, and it may have seemed to have been a sort of sacrilege to change the actual date of Christmas. Changing the calendar is one thing, changing the date of Christmas was something else. So he didn't actually change it. And so people have continued to celebrate Christmas on the 25th of December, which is the date of Christmas for the 4th century. Okay. So that's what's so strange about this whole thing. Okay. So it's important to realize that certain fixed dates in the Christian liturgical calendar could take place after they should, according to when they were fixed by church leaders. So if these dates had been fixed at certain dates according to the calendar at the time, and then the Julian calendar had kind of moved off, those dates could have become false. And here we're talking about Christmas, but for example, Epiphany on January the 6th, that could be seen to be false. The presentation of Christ at Candlemas on the 2nd of February could be seen to be false. The Annunciation of Christ on the 25th of March, of course, this is 9 months before Christmas, so it should be at spring equinox, the 21st of March. And again, this was not changed. And it's possible to see different dates. Well, for example, the St. John the Baptist, which is the 25th or the 24th of June, is most probably linked to summer solstice, okay? So that's a very interesting thing that you should realize. And so basically, if we were to follow the kind of initial idea that was put forward by the founding fathers of the church at the beginning, then people should celebrate Christmas at winter solstice and not 4 days afterwards. Okay? This is probably a pretty difficult thing to accept just because of habit. And people have come to believe that these dates are sort of special dates. But in fact, as I've just explained, they are linked to a sort of discrepancy in the initial calendar as introduced by Julius Caesar. So what about Christmas itself and how it's feasted? The fact that we bring in Christmas trees and all that kind of thing. The church didn't introduce these principles. So what's the oldest evidence of winter solstice festival? I asked this to ChatGPT. Of course, he says it's one of the oldest celebrations dating back to thousands of years. And there's archaeological evidence which suggest that ancient cultures had rituals and festivities associated with winter solstice. This is quite well known now. You know, many people think about Stonehenge, for example, in England, and the astronomical observations that are linked to the solstices. Here in Brittany, where I live, in the megaliths of Brittany, many of the dolmens and the major dolmens like Gavrinis or the Table des Marchands, their corridors, are perfectly oriented to sunrise at winter solstice. It's very obvious that the winter solstice was of very great importance. And the reason for that needs to be understood more clearly. Okay. So ChatGPT also talks about Scandinavia, Celts and Romans and Scandinavia. Their feast is called Yule. And Amerindian peoples and ancient Egyptians. This is very interesting because in southern Egypt, I'll be coming into this in my next talk about the orientation of temples in southern Egypt towards the winter solstice. And obviously in southern Egypt, the winter solstice has nothing to do with the cold or anything like that. Okay, so the winter solstice is often associated with northern climates, okay, but it's linked also to other things. So here you see ChatGPT says these celebrations are often associated with the renewal, the return of light, and the end of dark days. That's true when you get further north in the northern hemisphere, but that's not true particularly in southern Egypt or in Yucatan with the Maya, or at Karahan Tepe, for example, in Turkey. There are different elements linked to this, and I've often gone into this question about something particular happening on a cosmological level when the sun's axis is most inclined towards the sun at summer solstice or away from the sun at winter solstice. Written evidence, of course, about prehistory is very scarce because prehistory means before writing. And as we've said, it's linked to astronomical structures. That's how we can date and understand the winter solstice. Yule, the ancient Scandinavian feast, was a pre-Christian celebration, often called pagan, so it's linked to solstice. And it's still a feast day today. It's celebrated over several days, and it's linked to the renewal of light, the longest night of the year, as we said, in the northern hemisphere. It's very important. Okay. Trees. Yes, of course, we bring in Christmas trees. These obviously come from Scandinavia. Fir trees, it says, were sometimes decorated to symbolize eternal life in the middle of winter. I think also it's interesting to bring a tree into the home in the middle of winter when you're heating, and it brings certain substances inside your own home. Okay. I'll be coming back to this question of winter solstice in my next talk. It's about the winter solstice in Egyptian temples. It's very well known in the Temple of Karnak. You can see in the inset photo here, the winter solstice in the Temple of Karnak. But there isn't just the Temple of Karnak. There are other temples, and I'll be talking about that much more in detail, and especially about the Temple of Hatshepsut, where we can see the sunrise at winter solstice here. Thanks for listening to this talk, and please subscribe if you haven't done so, and share this video with your friends. See you soon. Bye-bye.